Our ecological footprint is sometimes also called a carbon footprint. You might have heard that term before. What this measures is the carrying capacity of Earth and if we're using it reasonably or not. So it's looking at how many resources do we actually need versus how many are we using. So we have this society is using 1.5 times what the ecosystem can sustainably support. So that varies from person to person. And not everyone is using 1.5 times. Some people use less than one. Some people use more than that. There are online calculators that you can use to calculate what is your carbon footprint or your eco footprint, looking at are you using water, electricity, resources reasonably? Are you contributing to this 1.5 times? And it really just asks you questions about like how big is your house? What temperature do you keep it? How much energy are you using? How much waste are you producing? And looking at those other things. Of course, there are a lot of things that people can do. Okay, so we have how can we restore balance? That comes down to, looking at what is our own carbon footprint and what are ways that we can each reduce. I already talked about this in the last video, but technological innovation, looking at, moving to rechargeable batteries versus dependence on oil and natural gas. Trying to find alternative ways to create natural gas. So any kind of innovation that looks at what can we do with things, how can we use our resources better, how can we switch to using different resources. Thinking about our own personal behaviors and consumption. So what are we doing as individuals? Could we use different products? Could we use less plastic? Could we recycle more? Looking at that, how are we creating waste? Do I just throw batteries in the garbage or do I dispose of them as they're supposed to be disposed of so they don't end up in landfills? Thinking about products like that. Am I putting paint in the garbage bag and just throwing it out on the curb, or am I disposing of it in the correct way? And then we have some people who think that organizations especially, who are polluting or causing an economic imbalance, creating harmful products, that they should have to pay extra taxes or they should have to pay fines. Some of these already exist. So there are fines for waste. There are fines for dumping incorrectly. If I use more energy than someone else, I'm going to pay more for that energy. So some of this is already built into our society and how we pay for things. Okay, thinking about the common things that we share. So there really is that we have many common shared resources that belong to everyone or belong to kind of no one, what everybody uses. And we try to think about how does ruining that or impacting that kind of impact society. So we look at like land, air, water. Well, people can own land and I can choose to do what I want with my land. I can plant on it. I can build property, different things like that. But who owns air? And who's responsible for maintaining air and keeping air usable for citizens? What happens when one organization pollutes the air of an entire community, causing illness, diseases, different kinds of cancer, inability to live in an area? Same thing with water. Who owns water? Who has access to water? Who is polluting that water? And what is one organization or one group of people's polluting a water system doing to the people that are drinking that water or using that water? There's one of the documentaries that listed in the film talks about what happens if natural resources could defend themselves. For example, what would happen if the ocean was an actual person or its own entity that was able to sue to protect itself? What would that look like? Right now, no one owns the ocean. We have global agreements about how you can control a certain amount of ocean that is touching the land of your country, but no one owns the ocean. And so when no one owns it, who's responsible for maintaining it? Okay, and then same thing with our air. If no one owns it, who's responsible for keeping it safe for everyone in the community to breathe? We have 5 global problems that are indicated. 1, climate change, ozone depletion, resource scarcity, biodiversity, and threats to marine ecosystems. So we'll look at each one of these individually. Okay, first, climate change. So we put carbon dioxide and pollutants into the air. We have, such as carbon dioxide, we overproduce it right now. We do have ways to mitigate carbon dioxide. For example, trees help convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. So having green areas, having a lot of trees to help kind of counterbalance that. But when we remove trees and build a lot of buildings, then we're upsetting that balance and polluting the air. We have a lot of things that are causing climate change, a wide variety of things. 1, the earth is a natural living thing. And that natural living thing goes through different kinds of processes. So we've had ice ages where the entire earth was covered in ice. We've had melting things. We've had, scientific measurements of originally all the land masses were connected to each other and they move, and we have earthquakes and different things like that. And one is a certain amount of climate change is normal, and then a certain amount of climate change is actually caused by human behavior. Okay? And what amount that is. We also have what amount is recoverable, so that restoring balance. We can restore balance in, like I said, we can reduce carbon dioxide in the air by planting more trees. So there are different mitigations into how we can enact this thing. One of the main things caused by climate change is erratic weather conditions. We've had both erratic weather conditions and that the Earth's base temperature line is actually slowly creeping up, and it's getting warmer. So just kind of warmer temperatures overall. One of the main impacts of this is growing seasons. So shifting growing seasons, shortening growing seasons, removing the amount of land that's available for growing are some of the main impacts of this. Okay, ozone depletion. So when I was growing up, way back, ozone depletion was the main thing that everybody talked about. We're putting holes in the ozone. Our products are putting holes in the ozone. Try to reduce the amount of, especially aerosol cans. So that was kind of a thing we were all told. Don't use aerosols. Don't use aerosol cans. Change pollutants. We can't recover the ozone once it's gone. And so they were measuring that we had this hole in the ozone that was getting larger and larger. Well, through technological advancements, this has been in 1987, that's almost 40 years ago. where countries came together and negotiated that we were going to produce less CFC. Well, the benefit in this is we've come up with technological advances. We did a lot of consumer behavior education. We changed hairstyles. In the 80s, hairstyles used an amazing amount of hairspray. And the types of hairspray that were on the market were really, really bad. So now we've changed what goes into products. We no longer use the same CFCs in our refrigeration materials. We no longer put it in spray cans, and that the ozone is actually repairing itself. And so scientists are predicting that it's going to be fully repaired within a couple of years. So we can see how we can actually reverse damage when it's happening and when we catch it. Okay, so it's just it's a combination of technological advances and making changes in our behaviors and how we use things. Okay, resource scarcity. Land and water. So fresh water is renewable. However, we have been using water at a greater level than we renew it. Okay, we have to look at different kinds of things. So we have 0.1% of the Earth's water is fresh water. That's not very much. One of the advances that they're looking for is how can they make ocean water drinkable. Right now, ocean water is not drinkable by humans. Humans cannot survive on it. And so that's one thing that scientists have been trying to do. How do we have a water shortage? There are a lot of predictions that World War III will actually be fought over water. That we'll get ourselves into such a water scarcity of fresh drinkable water that we will end up fighting over it. Of course, you see we've actually had some of those water shortages. We still have some issues. Even though our river, we had a lot of rain this year, our river was the highest it has been in several years. We had some flooding and stuff. Even with that, the Mississippi River is on its 5th year in a row of record lows that is causing massive shipping problems. So different things like that. Arable land. Okay, and this is, soil erosion, loss of nutrients, water scarcity, poor drainage, different things that we can do to it. So one thing, like loss of nutrients, that's one of the things that I was talking about, that crop rotation helps with that. So certain crops pull nutrients out of the soil. If you continue to grow that same crop over and over and over, eventually that soil becomes completely unusable for anything. And so this is where crop rotation has come into play. Not all land is good for growing. Okay, not all soil is good enough for growing. Soil erosion. So this, of course, comes from weather patterns, weather and behaviors. If we don't have water, so we have a couple of states in the U.S. where water scarcity is becoming a real hindrance to agriculture. Kansas and Nebraska being two of those, where they have to import a lot of their water and use water systems to keep their fields in order to grow their crops. So a lot of different kind of issues and problems that can happen and cause shortages. Of course, development. When we build cities, we're taking away growable land. Okay, and biodiversity. So biodiversity is the number of species and genetic makeup. Where our massive biodiversity loss is when rainforests are torn down. Okay, so destructions of rainforests, because most rainforests have species that we've never even discovered. That's one of the predictions, is that there are multiple habitats within the rainforest that have not been discovered yet. Bugs, creatures and stuff, plants that we haven't even found yet. Not to mention how much the rainforest creates that we already depend on for certain kinds of growing. For example, chocolate and cocoa, rainforests are the absolute best places to grow them, bananas, etc. When we tear down rainforests, we have less land available for growing those types of products. The number one reason for tearing down rainforests is for cattle production. So increasing the production of beef, especially in South America, where they import a lot of beef out, and then taking down for wood for logging to build structures. Okay, we'll talk about we'll continue this in the next video.